Welcome back to Building Better Businesses in ABA with me, Jonathan Mueller. It's a weekly podcast about the forces reshaping our autism services field. Learn from successful entrepreneurs, payers, investors, and leaders in applied behavior analysis. Thank you, kind listener, for letting me into your world today. Now on to the show. My name's Jonathan Mueller. I'm the host of Building Better Businesses in ABA podcast. And my guest today is Zhou. And this is Jing's second time on the pod. I'm thrilled to have her back. Jing is a BCBA and president of Core Action Consulting, helping business owners achieve their dreams. For 19 years, Jing was the founder, owner, and CEO of Interventions Unlimited, an ABA therapy company, and of Alpine Academy, an ABA school for children with autism. Welcome back to the pod, Jing.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm so excited to be back on this podcast. I was looking forward to our conversation.
Well, Jing, we've released probably 60-ish episodes at this point, and yours is like one of the top 3 all-time listened to because you have such poignant and important feedback and guidance for ABA providers. So I want to dive back into these questions and just think about, it's been almost a year since we last talked. What's changed in our field in the last
Yeah.
year?
Well, first, I'm so thrilled when you told me that your audience liked my message. So, from the last episode that we did together, like you, I'm very passionate about supporting the ABA business community and empowering other BCBA entrepreneurs so they can excel at every stage of their business journey. Because building a business is seriously hard work. And most people don't understand the personal sacrifice and the owners make for their business, such as the highs and lows and the feast and famine and the challenges of balancing the needs of the clients and the employees and the business and balancing the quality and the growth and the profit in a people-centered business such as ABA therapy company. So I get it. I've walked in their shoes and I really want to help them. And I want them to know that it is possible to build a business with quality and profit. And that's why I do what I do and why I'm so excited to be here because you share the same passion for supporting better ABA businesses. So, to answer your questions about what has changed, wow, it's been a year. The time went by really fast. Here are a few of my observations about the changes this year. I would say the first change I've seen is the layoffs in our field this year, which is not often seen in a field in such high demand, such as ABA. And the second one, I would call it more of a trend instead of a change. I've seen more discussion around ethical business practice of running an ABA business, such as is it ethical to tell parents to take their children out of school to participate in a 40-hour of ABA therapy program, even when they're doing well in school? And is it ethical to turn down kids unless they can commit to a 40-hour program? So I feel like the more discussion we have around these topics, the more we can protect the integrity of our profession. So those are really good, healthy discussions in our field. Another trend I've seen is shifting focus on applying the principles of ABA in more compassionate ways. I've seen more people talking about the application of our principles and fundamentals in more compassionate ways. The fundamentals haven't changed, but the application of our science is definitely evolving.
The application of our science is absolutely evolving. I'm seeing the same things. I mean, in full disclosure, Ascend had to go through layoffs of not our clinical team members, but some of our operations team not too long ago. And your point around the personal sacrifices that ABA or any business owners make is something that doesn't get talked a lot about. I think most entrepreneurs would characterize their work and their organization and their team members as family, right? And so these are like really gutting and hard things to get through. But I'm curious, what are some of the issues that you see that are keeping ABA practice owners up at night?
Based on my conversations with a lot of practice owners and my own social media polls, not an official poll, just on some Facebook groups, the staff turnover is on the top of the list that keeps many of them up at night. And I did a survey, I'd say 100 some responses are all saying staff turnover was what keeps them up at night.
Staff turnover has always been, as any human services organization, staff turnover is always a thing. And yet, to your point, like I'm reflecting this anecdotally in my experience and what I hear, but it has gotten a lot worse in the last 6, 8, 12, 18 months. Do you A, have any insights into why turnover is higher? And B, what can business owners do about it?
Okay. Well, this topic alone can be an entire another episode to dive in. There is so much to talk about it on this topic. Definitely, this has gotten worse in the last couple of years. And no doubt, turnover hurts the organization and the remaining staff and the kids and families all around. And it costs the company the time and resources to replace and train people, and it increases the workload for the existing staff and then destroys the morale. When people are constantly seeing the turnover, people are coming and going, and they have to do more work when other people are not around. So it really affects the existing staff, and it decreases the clinical quality, and the clients are missing out. And what's worse is the parents will lose trust in ABA and thinking ABA doesn't work, which ABA can be life changing. So let me ask you a question. Do you think you can hire the right people based on a 30 minutes interview?
My answer is no way in heck, unless you get lucky.
Right. If you're lucky, you might hire the right people based on a short interview. But for the most part, the answer is no. And it rarely worked out for us when we took a shortcut in our hiring because we were in a time crunch just to put people in because we're so short. And it never really worked out to find the right people. So, would you agree that reducing turnover really starts with hiring the right people?
100%. You're preaching
Right.
to the choir.
Yeah, so I believe that employment is relational rather than transactional. It is no longer trading time for money, and people want meaningful work. They want a good relationship with their boss or the supervisors and their coworkers, and they want a good fit and they want the work life balance. So, as in any type of relationship, it is based on shared values, shared interests, and mutual respect. It is difficult to discover if there is a good fit for both sides based on brief interactions. So, having a thorough hiring process that is unique to your culture is essential to get to know the candidates better, as well as for them to get to know you, because there has to be a good fit on both ends. So I usually would recommend to my clients of creating multiple points of interaction during a hiring, asking better questions during the interviews, to seeing the candidates in formal and casual settings can help you know the candidates better, as well as using some pre-employment tests such as DISC assessment, strengths finder, or predictive indexer, so many of them. Those tests can help reveal more information about the candidate's motivation and personality. And we used the DISC assessment in the past, so it was really helpful in finding a natural fit for certain positions, and also for the supervisors to learn more about this employee and how to motivate them. For example, if someone is high on I in the DISC profile, that employee would need more of that pat on the back for them to feel encouraged and appreciated. But someone who is really high on D, and they're already driven by completing tasks. So they're task oriented. So they're not as motivated, I guess, by that pat on the back versus someone who is high on D. And if I'm hiring someone for a financial position, so I absolutely need this person to show a high on C, a high C, which naturally they're very attention to detail and very organized. So that really has helped tremendously once we started using the DISC assessment to find the right natural fit for the position that we're hiring for. And a thoughtful hiring process that reflects your culture can attract the right candidate. And you guys have one at Ascent. And I love the article from Stanford about your hiring process that really let the candidates experience your culture. So that is amazing. I share that with my clients for them to kind of read the article and understand, reflect on their own hiring process. Does that reflect your culture? Um, Improving the candidate's experience during the hiring process is super important in a competitive market these days to attract the right candidate. I was reading an article about the candidate's experience during the interviewing process. So they surveyed 500 job seekers and they summarized that 67% of job seekers have had at least one negative experience in the hiring process in the last 12 months. So that was in 2021. And 58% of the job seekers had declined a job offered due to poor experience. That's very high number. If they don't have a really good experience during that process, people will decline the job offer. So that doesn't help the organization find the right fit if they didn't create a good experience for job seekers during their hiring. And once they hire the right people, and of course, you have to maintain that relationship like any relationship. And relationship is built on mutual respect and trust, as I mentioned earlier. So, do your employees feel respected? Do they feel you care about them as individuals? Do they feel you care about their growth and their best interests? People want to grow in an organization. Do they feel like the organization cares about their growth? And of course, their experience during the onboarding process and their ongoing training and coaching they receive all play a significant role in the retention.
Your point around this employment being relational, not transactional, is a really important one that I want to double click on because it feels like there's an evolution of this grand bargain between employee, employer. Whereas maybe in the past it was, yep, there's sort of a financial component, right? You get your salary through it.
Mhm.
But now there's a much higher expectation, especially in the extraordinarily low unemployment rates we're seeing. There's a much higher expectation of employers being able to do all those things that you described, from investing in professional development, training, coaching, caring about them as people. This is all relational. And you know what really blows my mind, Jing, is when I still hear of organizations that's like 30-minute interview for a BCBA. And it's like, you've got a heartbeat and a credential, then come on over. Like, how are you differentiating yourself? How are you, to your point, helping a candidate understand what is unique and therefore special and powerful about your organization? Well, let me ask you, because I'm a huge fan of the disc. I am an I, both my natural and adapted style. I'm an I with a little D. And it's funny because it's what do I's like want most to be liked, and what do they fear most is like not being liked. Whereas D's, what do they want most? Options, what do they fear most being taken advantage of? So it's a really neat construct of, I mean, there are many, boy, many different tools out there. I got to ask, what disc style are you?
Well, I'm a high D and C and then I, which
I love it.
I think this is wonderful to bring self awareness to yourself as well. Because typically, people that are high on D and they are very task oriented, they want to get things done. And this is a good reminder for me to be more aware to spend time on the people side because sometimes my staff need that. So I need to be intentional to give them that time. So for them to talk about their weekends and to talk about their personal life and to really pay attention to people. So I think DISC is a very good tool just for ourselves to be aware of our strengths and area to improve, as well as understanding the employees and what they need and what motivates them based on their personality profile.
Yeah. I mean, it does all those things. And you think about the power of modeling self awareness
Hmm.
to your team members, right? Because it can be easy to think, oh, I've graduated college or I've graduated from my master's and I've got my BCBA and now like I'm good. There's no more learning that. And the reality is that's like where the learning journey really starts. And so
Hmm.
I think it's powerful for leaders to have the humility. of saying, let's find out. I want to find out more about myself and make sure I am super aware so that my team members also imbue that quality.
Right.
But the things I really like, Jing, that you and I have talked about before, you have this expression about going from doer to whoer mode. Tell
Uh-huh.
me more about that, Jing, and especially in this context of the most important things that an owner needs to do
Hmm.
to successfully and sustainably scale their practice.
Right. And I'm glad that you asked this. What the most important thing that owners have to do is to grow their business. Have you met practice owners who answer the phones, talk to the parents and the referrals? They treat kids, supervise RBTs, hire people, handles the payroll, and submit the claims. They're the superheroes in their own business and the best employees in their own business, right? And I've met many of them. I think I was one of them when I first started my business, and I quickly had to learn to delegate and to trust and empower my team because there's no way I could grow and scale the business if I had to be in everything in my business, had to do everything. So, owners who do everything and need to be involved in every detail aspect of their business, they become the bottleneck of their own growth. So to grow their business, they have to raise the lid and it is not scalable. No one gets 48 hours in a day. And the owners need to accomplish the goals through their team. So they have to become really good at achieving things through others, not just personally do them themselves. So instead of asking yourself, how can I get it done? And you ask yourself, who on my team or who in my network can do this? So, shifting from a doer mode to whoer mode is all about effective delegation and coaching people up so the right who can do the how and not personally figuring out how am I supposed to do it. So, you think about who can do this. So, the owner need to focus on growing their business. They should delegate pretty much all tasks that keep them from growing their business and tasks that are not in their wheelhouse, for example, like the credentialing and billing. And if it's not in their wheelhouse, they should delegate or outsource to companies like Element or somebody else in their organization to do that. And any tasks that they are not passionate about, even though they're very good at it, they should delegate. So, for example, I'm very good at numbers, and actually, I'm very good with revenue cycle management, looking at the claims and the bookkeeping and any of those, but I had no interest in those things. So, I'm not passionate about them, and I hate those tasks. So, even though I'm very good at those, and I still delegate, and we had an entire team, so handling those numbers and things like that, but I will oversee them. And things that they want their team to learn, they should delegate. Otherwise, how is their team going to learn those skills? So if the owners keep thinking, I can do it better than anyone else, and I used to always think like that, oh, I'll just do it because I can do it better. And then I have to stop myself and to think about I have to teach my team to do it. Otherwise, how are they going to learn if I keep doing them at myself? So it is
Th-
essential to take the time to teach the employees how to do things and don't be afraid that they may make mistakes. And it might be easier for you to just do it yourself, just like tying your kids' shoes. It's easier just to do it yourself, right? You have to teach them. So a good book to read about this topic is Dan Sullivan's Who Not How.
I will definitely drop a link in the show notes. This, I think, Jing, you have touched on what is a nerve and a double edged sword about being a superhero business owner, because you're exactly right. If you have started an organization and you're growing it, like you are a superhero, full stop. And guess what? It means you're cursed with competence and you probably can do many tasks
Right.
and a wider range of tasks on your team. But if you're not spending time intentionally teaching them to do that, then you're cursed forever to have to keep doing those tasks. And so here's what the imagery I got in my head that you, for the first time, like, and you helped me see this. I love Marvel movies and DC, but think about any superhero. from a Batman to Superman to Thor to you name it. Which superhero actually scales and teaches others to do what they do? None, because those superpowers are not, that's not scalable. So this idea of intentionally delegating, but then spending the time to
Mhm.
teach your team, spending the time knowing that they're going to make mistakes. Because guess what? You and I made mistakes plenty. I'll speak for myself. I made plenty of mistakes, right? As an owner, like that's just part of that learning process. That feels so crucial to building a sustainable practice, right?
Exactly, because you want to have a team of A players, a team of superheroes, so not just one superhero, and that the owner becomes a superhero or the best employee of their own business. So the owner can't be the best employee of their business. The owner has to work on their business so the owner can grow and encourage the team and empower their team to grow alongside with the owner.
I love that. Empower your team to grow alongside you. That's what a leader at their best is doing. Well, Jing, on an episode last summer on the pod with Dr. Rohit Verma and Lanny Fritz, fascinating episode, they estimated that half of ABA businesses are losing money. I'll be honest with you, I think it's way higher than that. I mean, there's sort of this perception because of some big headline transactions out there that it's easy to make money in this field. That's not my experience. I'll be super honest. It's hard to make money and run a quality organization and deliver highest quality services to kiddos.
Right.
What advice do you have to ABA practices who are trying to get profit?
I like this topic and talking about profit. And profit is like oxygen to a business. Your business survival depends on it. So we can't avoid talking about this topic just because we work with people and we're in the autism business. So talking about profit just seems uncomfortable. But if we want the business to survive and serve more kids and families, we have to be profitable and to be sustainable. But the profit itself does not drive profit, right? And only focusing on profit is not going to increase profit. So my philosophy on profit is that people and quality drive profit. We cannot have quality without good people. So the focus has to be on the people first. And certainly, responsible financial management is necessary to keep the finance in check so that you're not overspending and you're spending more than what you're bringing in. As I see it, many ABA businesses have people problems that contribute to profit problems. As I mentioned earlier, turnover is a huge pain point for many ABA companies. Certainly, this problem is not just in our field. And what do you think the cost of the turnover is for a BCBA position and for a RBT position? What's your estimate?
We actually recently calculated this. For an RBT position, it's
Uh-huh.
well over $10,000.
Okay. And what is the calculation for BCBA?
It's easily twice that, and that's just the financial calculation, right? That doesn't take into account the trust destruction it does with
Right,
families, right? Go through these turnover, the slowdown of outcomes that a kiddo might not achieve because of it.
right. And the loss of revenue, right? When there's turnover, just from a financial perspective. And my friend and colleague, Linda Ratner, and I did a calculation on predictive index to see what the cost would be. And based on our calculation and the BCBA turnover, the cost can be close to 30,000 and 18,000 for RBT. So that would be all the time to replace and train and the loss of revenue and during that process when no one is there. So if a business loses one BCB and five RBTs in a year, the cost could be like $120,000. That hits their bottom line. So if a company can improve their profitability by solving the people problem, and they can definitely become more profitable if they're better at hiring and retention, because sometimes they might not see how that is really affecting the profitability. So better people strategy will lead to better quality, and quality drives the business. So that's my first advice. My second is around responsible financial management. And you don't really need to be having an accounting degree to be a business owner, but you have to know your numbers. Unfortunately, many BCBA owners that I've worked with do not really know their numbers well. And I work with a lot of them on understanding their numbers. So the owners have to know their revenue numbers on an accrual basis, and they have to know their direct labor cost and admin labor costs and their profit margin. And they need to have regular financial reviews on the profit and loss and cash position and project their financials and understand how fast their business can grow based on the cash flow and based on their operations. Unless they have capital investment and they have to rely on the money that comes from the operation. So they have to understand how fast can they grow so they don't die from undisciplined pursuit of more and more while their cash flow operation cannot support that growth rate. So when I grew up, my parents always taught me to spend less than what I earn. So I apply that in pretty much my personal finance and the business. I've always ensured a healthy level of profit that provides the security for the business first and spend what's left on operations. So after we have secured the profit and kind of take that off the table and then budget around what's left. So this method didn't let me grow as rapidly as some of the other larger companies with a huge financial investment, but we had steady growth year over year and I was profitable from day one. And I've not had any year that we were in a loss and I was not in debt and I had good cash reserve for rainy days and did not have to worry about payroll. Our employees were doing a great job and kids were making progress and parents were happy. And that was good enough for me. And that was success. So profit was never a big focus for me. And probably was an area that I spent the least amount of time on. But I did have a strategy to manage it responsibly and review monthly after my bookkeeper updated the books. So I wanted to see the numbers where we are from month to month. So if there is anything that we need to correct and course correct. And usually when you look at the financials, so it's already late, it's a lagging indicator. So we do have like weekly scorecards that track the leading indicators. So such as the volume of leads, calls, and interest for our services, how many clients we're enrolling each week, and what are our service hours look like week to week. So those are your leading indicators. So that would allow you to course correct sooner before you look at the financials. So I feel like that worked for us. And it may not work for every other company or different sizes of company, but that's kind of how we manage it. And I managed to be profitable over the last 20 years when I owned the business. And actually, there's another book called Profit First. Mike McCallowitz wrote the book that kind of conceptualized what I was doing. I just read the book this year. I thought, oh, wow, that's what I was doing. And it offered validation. And he introduced the concept of revenue minus profit equals expenses. Instead of the traditional view of revenue minus expenses equals profit, whatever gets left after you spend is the profit. So he kind of did it the opposite way.
That's powerful. I have not read that book, so I certainly will. But the notion revenue minus profit, like predetermine what your profit needs to be, both for what you want your lifestyle to be as a practice
Mhm.
owner, but also for stocking away rainy day funds, right? So ideally, companies will have 3 to 6 months of cash in the bank or of payroll expenses in the bank, right? To be able to weather through rainy day scenarios. So I think this is
Right.
genius advice. And that the notion of we don't see on our P&L a specific line item for turnover. Much more insidious, right? It's like, oh,
Mhm.
okay, maybe increased hiring costs. Maybe it's decreased BCBA utilization or time. Maybe it's phantom revenue that never was earned, right? So it appears in all these different places across the P&L. To your point, I mean, those 18,000 and $30,000 number figures you quote, I believe 100%. Um,
Mhm.
and so this is why sometimes we don't think enough about how we can use antecedent strategies to prevent turnover and use leading indicators. Um, to your point around like, do weekly pulse scores with your team, see how your team members are feeling. And that can be a leading indicator to whether or
Mhm.
not they might turn over in the future. But act then, as opposed to your point, financial indicators that happen on the back end. So let's say like we know layoffs are happening, referenced this earlier, Jing. And this is of all sizes of providers, right? And for profit, nonprofit, PE back, not PE back. That's what we're seeing in our field right now. How should an ABA practice owner determine whether to make a layoff, and are there right and wrong ways to do it?
Yeah, layoff is very difficult. I can't imagine what it feels like to be on the receiving end of a layoff. So to be in the shoes of someone who has to be on the chopping board, I hate to use that word. And I think the best way to deal with layoff is to prevent one. And business owners and leaders have the responsibilities to their people. So they have to manage the financials in a responsible way so kids don't lose needed services and then people don't lose their jobs due to no fault of their own. And HBR, Bain, and McKinsey all did studies on companies that not only survive, but thrive during and after economic downturns. In these studies, they discover the difference between thrivers and failures is preparation. So companies can prepare for financial hardships and economic downturns by investing in technology, strengthening their leadership, developing relationship with their banks that have a strong line of credit, building a cash reserve, diversifying revenue sources, retaining their most profitable relations, prioritizing spending and cost savings so they can prepare for those things ahead of time. And companies should evaluate and pre select a labor reduction strategy in the event labor reduction is inevitable. So the leadership team should discuss what would happen in their workforce if their revenue reduces by 20% or 30%. They should decide whether to reduce their workforce by, let's say, 10%, or reduce work hours by 10%, or reduce compensation by 10% in order to weather through the hardships. And a lot of times I've heard companies actually, when they plan and discuss that ahead of time, just for preparation, and they prefer to reduce compensation by a certain percentage temporarily to get through the hardship rather than just laying off a lot of people. So I think the best way to deal with that is to prevent one if they can. And especially in our field, there is such a strong demand for ABA therapy. And it's really difficult for me to even think that layoff would happen. So if it's planned and managed well. And there are definitely the right ways and the wrong ways of laying people off. And sending an email without any prior notice is not the way to do it. And for leaders, putting themselves in the shoes of the employees and asking themselves, if I was the employee being laid off, how would I like it to be handled? That can put more care and empathy in the process. And even though it is a difficult thing to do, at least we can put as much care and empathy in the process as possible.
Well said. And there are a lot of great resources if you do find yourself in that position as a practice owner around the thoughtful way to do it. But I love how you described the antecedent intervention of like new scenario planning, right? Because
Mhm.
what some organizations might do is say, all right, we've been growing at this rate for some number of years. We're going to keep growing. So let's now start investing in more of other things that will help support that growth. Well, that growth doesn't come, then all of a sudden you're faced with having to make unsavory decisions. But that scenario planning is a great point to figure out what you're going to do if you do get there and take some of that emotion out of decisions that you might have to make to keep the business alive and running.
And sometimes cross training their employees can give them more opportunities to move from one department of the company to the other. So let's say if we don't need as many as administrative staff, but if our administrative staff had also been trained or had exposure to working with kids, and they could work as an RBT, right? And I've seen companies do that. So in our situation, we've had like receptionists and who could go into the classroom to help the kids if it's necessary. And so that person is more adaptable to be in different positions within the company. So that helps not having to like cut people because they can't be moved, shifted in somewhere else in the company.
That's a great point. And cross training is just a crucially important part of any sustainable business, right? Well, Jing, what's one thing every ABA practice owner should start doing and one thing to stop doing?
I will go back to that concept of doer to whoer. One thing they should start doing is to start delegating so they can be freed to work on their business and stop saying, I have to do it and asking, who can do this?
What should they stop doing?
Stop saying that I have to do this.
Yeah, actually, the first part of it. Genius. Oh, Jing, this is such a powerful conversation. Where can people find you in Core Action Consulting online?
And they can find me on LinkedIn or my website, coreactionconsult.com, or email me at Jing, Jing, at coreactionconsult.com.
Awesome. Well, are you ready for the hot take questions?
Yes, go fire them.
We've switched some of them up a little bit from when you were on a year ago. So let's
Mhm.
get started. On your deathbed, what's the one thing you want to be remembered for?
I want to be remembered that I've made a difference for other people and I've done a good job in my roles as a mother, a wife, and daughter.
What's your most important self care practice?
I enjoy taking walks outside. So, taking a walk and listening to my audibles or podcasts is my favorite thing to do. I'm thankful that I live in Florida so I can walk outside pretty much year round.
What's your favorite book?
You've already heard me mentioning a couple of books. I enjoy reading. I like reading all sorts of books related to business, leadership, self improvement, and mindset. Um, when I don't know anything and feel stuck, my default first thing to do is to find a book. Let me read about it. Maybe I'll find solution in the book. So one of my favorite books, there's so many books that I like and enjoy. And my one of the books I really like is Don't Sweat Over the Small Stuff. It puts things in perspective when I feel stressed. So it helps me to think, is that a small stuff or is that a really big, huge thing? So a lot of times it's just really small stuff. It's not life or death, right? No one bleeds, no one dies. So just relax and let go.
Oh, it's so well said. Well, you could give your 18-year-old self one piece of advice. What would it be?
I would say have an open mind and have a growth mindset will be the advice that I would give. When you're 18, sometimes you always think, okay, I know everything. I know more than other people, but you really don't know what you don't know. So having an open mind and a growth set is super important to growth.
All right. Well, you can only wear one style of footwear. What would it be?
Sandals.
Perfect for Florida.
Right.
Right on. Thank you so much, Jake, for coming on the pod and for sharing your considerable experience and wisdom and knowledge and book recommendations. I appreciate you, my friend.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me back.
Hey, kind listener. Thanks for tuning in. If you like this episode, can you do me a favor? Give me a rating on your favorite podcast channel. It helps more values-aligned people like you find the pod. Till next time, peace.